film you're about to see describes the special program of the Veterans Administration in training the blinded veteran in the difficult task of learning how to live with blindness. You'll see that this program is neither sentimental nor maudlin. Actually, it's hard and austere, although performed with loving kindness by all of those trained workers in this field, many of whom are blind themselves. The experiences and techniques developed and utilized by the U.S. Army so ably during the last war have been employed and extended by the Veterans Administration in subsequent years with extraordinary success. The graduate of this program returns to life better equipped to handle his troubles with alert and eager confidence. So skilled do many of them become, in fact, that after a few moments spent with them, you forget they're blind, which is what they want.
Most of us live in a familiar, a comfortable world. A world of sunshine and shadows, green grass, blue sky. A world we take for granted.
This is Washington, Mr. McCabe. You're home now. May I help you?
Oh, no, thank you. I can make that.
There are those who find themselves suddenly thrown into a world of darkness, dependent on family and friends for continued existence. To regain personal independence, use of the LongCane is one answer for those with courage and determination. For example, Charles McCabe, a veteran of World War II. But let's let him tell you.
It dates back to the Normandy invasion in 1944. The landmine explosion left me with only... But fortunately, I had enough sight to go back to my former employment. Then about 7 years later, my sight began to fail. Gradually at first, but finally completely. Although this practically confined me to my home, it was okay at first. My family was glad to do things for me. They were more than willing to help.
Here, Charles. I'll do it for you.
Sit still, Charlie. What station do you want? Wait, Charlie. Don't come down those stairs alone. You might get hurt.
Charles, you know you can't go out alone. You might get hit by a car. Wait till Dad gets home. He'll take you for a walk.
I soon found I was a prisoner in my own home. My overprotective family wouldn't allow me to move by myself, till I wondered when they'd get fed up. I didn't have long to wait.
Charles, am I going to have to wait on you hand and foot for the rest of your life?
Life had reached a point where I could no longer ignore my helplessness. How long could I continue to ask my family to be my personal servants? I knew that I must do something to help myself, but what? I was blind, and it just seemed the whole world had closed its eyes to my problem.
McCabe was admitted to the Veterans Administration Hospital, Hines, Illinois, where a well-rounded program of medical as well as therapeutic services are provided to aid in the reorganization of the blind patient's mode of living. A great many of totally and partially blinded veterans have taken part in this program. Men of various ages, different levels of intelligence and aptitudes. Mastering the techniques of foot travel is a long and difficult struggle. A struggle in which the entire being of the individual is involved. Mind, body, and will. The chief of the blind rehabilitation section, Russ Williams, is himself a blind veteran. Williams makes it a point to have a friendly talk with each new patient. From these talks, he gains important information about the patient's home life and past.
There are no easy solutions to these problems. Here, run your hand over this cane. The LongCane. The answer to a lot of the problems of the blind. Learn to use the cane the right way, and I think, well, you begin to see daylight. You become a person again, not someone who travels just at the convenience of others. You'll move of your own will, not just here in the hospital alone, but in the world outside.
On McCabe's first day in the blind section, a therapist guided him through the cafeteria line. As guides to his location, he learned to use the cold of the milk chest, the warmth of the steam table. Carrying a tray full of food was a challenge. Landing it safely was a victory. Two days were devoted to elementary techniques. Then, Smigelski, an orientation therapist, introduced McCabe to the LongCane. Smigelski indicated the proper arc of the cane, approximately the width of McCabe's shoulders, thus providing protection for both sides of his body. As the left foot came forward, it sent the cane tip to his right. As his right foot came forward, the cane goes to the left, and so on. That was the rhythm. McCabe began to put into practice the fundamentals of the touch technique, and his performance bore all the marks of a beginner. Now began the long hours of hard work to improve his cane technique.
Dr. Peters wanted in surgery.
McCabe learned that the blind must develop a sense of hearing, touch, and smell to such a degree that sounds, contacts, and odors become clues. Clues that exist in the sighted person's awareness of space. Clues that must be brought into sharp focus by the blind in mastering foot travel. In the blind section, other therapeutic activities were prescribed. Activities which would later prove helpful to the patient in his bid for his independence. As McCabe overcame each of the tasks set before him, his confidence grew. He felt the tide of the struggle slowly changing in his favor. McCabe was ready to go outdoors. On McCabe's fifth day of outdoor therapy, Smigelski familiarized him with the route to the administration building by tracing a map on the back of his hand. Along this route were blind patients in various stages of training. Dumas, his progress complicated by the absence of a will to improve. Stevens, doing fairly well. Danielian, making rapid progress. For to some, the mastery of foot travel comes more easily than to others. But for most, the struggle is hard in all of its aspects. Later, McCabe had to navigate a route he had previously failed. All went well till he came to the place where the sidewalk and street blended. All of the systematic identification of place, painfully built up in McCabe's mind during the past month, seemed now to have gone for naught. Anger, with himself, with the world, arose within him.
Hey, Smig, where am I? In the street?
Sure. You made the same mistake you did this morning.
If it's so easy, you take the cane and do it yourself.
The next morning, with a different orienter, McCabe attempted the course for the third time. He remembered the sidewalk blending into the street. All was well until he came to the tree. What was it Russ Williams had said?
Learn to use the cane the right way, and I think you'll begin to see daylight.
That night, the mood of frustration was still on McCabe.
Still have it in for that tree, huh, Charlie?
Yes. And lampposts on street corners and fire hydrants and...
Sure, Charlie. I know. Why have sidewalks? Why not stop all traffic?
Well, that's an idea. Why not blindfold everybody and make it a world for the blind? Tell the truth, Russ. Don't you ever want to let loose? I mean, really blast out at the world?
Often. But better save your energy, Charles. You'll need it.
At regular intervals, the Red Cross stages a dance for the blind patients. As for McCabe, this was his first Red Cross dance, his first opportunity since his blindness for companionship with a girl. As they danced, McCabe became aware of a feeling of revelation that the handicap of blindness is not an automatic bar against normal social relationships. McCabe reached the second level of his reorganization process. And so, struggling on, step by step, McCabe completed his fourth week in the blind section. His geographic world now included the hospital grounds as well as the interior of the hospital. He was ready to emerge from this friendly, protected area into the complex world of the sighted. McCabe spent the next 3 weeks in a residential area. Then came the day for his first traffic light crossing. Listening, he picked up the sounds of the two streams of traffic, one in the parallel street, the other in the street facing him. Studying these sounds, McCabe could determine the traffic light controlling each stream of traffic. After waiting out 3 or 4 light changes, McCabe found courage to head into the street. Picking up the opposite curb, he continued on, ever alert for unexpected problems. In these 3 weeks, McCabe became familiar with problem after problem in outdoor foot travel. More and more streets took their place in his expanding world as he progressed through lesson after lesson. In the business district, McCabe's lessons continued. By now, his world was becoming one of all and physical aids to navigation. Traffic sounds, guide and shorelines, direction takers, landmarks, all aids in foot travel he would be able to put to use upon his return to his own home surroundings. But meanwhile, in McCabe's mind, his fear of the future was taking shape. Was the armor the blind section had forged around McCabe strong enough to protect him on his return home? The next morning, his route crossed the L tracks. As was his custom, McCabe set his cane tip on the guardrail to indicate when the gate would ascend.
What's the trouble, Mac?
That bell.
Okay, let's take a break.
The next morning, when McCabe failed to appear at breakfast, Smigelski went to his room.
Come in.
Hi, Mac.
Oh, Snake.
What's the trouble? I didn't see you at breakfast this morning.
I don't know. I just feel rotten.
Headache?
Well, I don't know what it is.
Smigelski brought McCabe's case to the attention of the chief of the blind section and the physiatrist supervising and guiding its activities. Upon being examined, McCabe was found to be in good physical shape. McCabe still refused to continue his therapy. Instead, he was keeping to himself, remaining in his room. Until that afternoon, he had a visitor.
What seems to be the trouble here, Mac?
I don't know, Russ, honestly. Maybe it was my headache that day, or maybe it was the bells.
No, Charlie. Since you won't tell me, I'll tell you. You're frightened. Plain frightened. The day's getting closer when you're to leave the hospital, and you're afraid. Afraid to go home. Now, isn't that the truth?
And so Williams brought McCabe face to face with the real issue. Did he or did he not want his independence?
Give up the LongCane now, Charlie, and you'll surrender everything you've gained. Of course, you'll still have your compensation. That'll last. But don't bank forever on the generosity of your family and friends.
As the years go by for the blinded, the warmth and admiration of society inevitably fades. In time, McCabe would be a lone blind man, existing in a world that belonged to the sighted.
It's a decision which not only you, but every blinded veteran has to make, Charlie. Smigelski will be waiting for you at the regular place in the morning. If you don't show up, well, then we'll know. Good night.
Sure. You made the same mistake you did this morning.
Charles?
His identity lost in this lifetime interlocking of two people, one active, himself passive, and all the remainder of his life would be in this image. In the morning, the station wagon was ready to leave for town. Let's go, Snake. We're late now. McCabe's objective that day was a clothing store in the midst of the business district. From his starting point, he took a guideline to the curb. Then his direction. Children's voices identified a familiar landmark. Later, he heard the elevated, another landmark. McCabe knew he was traveling south because the L tracks run east and west. Turning so that the sun was on his face in early afternoon, he knew he was now traveling west. In the distance, he heard the traffic on Fifth Avenue, another landmark. From a store came the smell of baked goods, still another landmark. McCabe knew then his objective was directly across this main artery. After reaching the corner and by counting store entrances, McCabe finally reached his objective, a mile from his starting point. The next 2 weeks were spent in an even more densely populated business area. Amid swarms of shoppers, McCabe had learned to shorten his cane to avoid tripping up passers-by. By now, in place of his old feeling of resentment, McCabe had learned to accept graciously offers of help from the sighted. But once reaching the curb, McCabe knew he must no longer depend on the vision of the sighted. Instead, he must navigate on his own again. He had also learned how to navigate through revolving doors. And use escalators. McCabe's world continued to enlarge. He was now able to make purchases on his own. Take extended bus trips. Finally, returning to the hospital. As McCabe reached the last leg of his struggle in mastering the LongCane, his doubts about his ability to navigate had vanished. This was a new McCabe, strong in his belief in himself, a belief strong enough to let him face the last test for the blind traveler, navigating in downtown Chicago. The heart of Chicago is the district that takes its name from the loop of elevated railways that encircle it. Because of the confusion of sounds, McCabe was unable to distinguish the two traffic streams. However, the police whistle and accompanying crowd surge gave McCabe his cue to cross. Each day during the next week, McCabe returned to the loop, gaining experience in navigating in the midst of crowds and rush hour traffic. And so Charles McCabe came to the end of his 18-week orientation course. On his last afternoon, McCabe stopped by the office of the chief of the blind section.
I think you'll find it easier at home now, Charlie. The social service worker has been in contact with your family all along. They know now what you can do. Oh, one more thing, Charlie. When you get home, you may find people who discourage the use of the long cane, or you yourself may become lax. You'll have to watch that.
Oh, no. Not after what I've been through here, Russ. This Kane and I are going to be together for a long time.